This video is gonna have a lot of cuts in it just because it's a long story and I know I'm gonna screw it up. Let's start this story 4 years ago. We had 2 children and my youngest had was about to turn 1 and I decided to start my career. And one of the reasons I wanted to be a software developer is because I knew that I would have the ability to work remote someday. And so my very first software development job, I found a company that had a technology stack, the type of code that I wanted to write, and it also had a remote worker, and 1 day a week most of the engineers worked from home. So thought that was a good option, and we started planning leaving California. We moved to Southern Florida with both myself and my husband being remote software developers. We had always just rented, and so we did that in Southern Florida as well. And we didn't know if we were going to like it, if we wanted the schools or where to buy, although buying a house was a big goal of ours. My oldest was starting pre-K when we learned that his school would not give him any Spanish because of the VPK, Voluntary Pre-K program. The state was paying for 20 hours a week of preschool, and so that 20 hours a week could not be any Spanish. So this is the first time that the idea of Puerto Rico came up. We knew that we wanted our kids to know at least 2 languages. We had lived in Chile earlier, and I had traveled a lot in Mexico and Central America. And we just wished that we had grown up bilingual to be able to communicate with more people, to be able to travel more. So we really wanted that for our children. My husband was like, hey, let's move to Fajardo in Puerto Rico. Did some Google searching, all I could find was beaches. And so we didn't consider it a whole lot. Like we didn't visit the island or anything. I had been to Puerto Rico a few times as a child, but it was always like off of a cruise ship in Old San Juan. Never really explored much of the island. After about a year of renting in Pompano Beach, we felt good about our financial situation, even though my husband had quit his job and he was working on his own company. He had cashed out his 401k when he did that. So we just really wanted to settle down, the American dream of swimming pool, a fence, a dog, all that. So I started looking in Southern Florida as to where we should buy a house. We couldn't settle on something. Even though we really liked Southern Florida, we liked how liberal it was, how many parks and playgrounds there were. We loved the weather and the beaches and the people from Venezuela, from Colombia, Mexico, Guatemala, all over the place. We did consider Parkland, and so I think you know where I'm going with this. This was about a year before the high school shooting there. Like we were driving around those neighborhoods considering buying a house in there. We ended up not moving there, but it just feels a little closer to home when you realize that those could have been my neighbors. That's a good school, a good area. It can happen anywhere. Well, we did end up buying a house, but it was in Northern Florida, and that was because of family. It was just really easy for my family to visit us and my husband's family to visit us. I love that house, and actually we still own it. We are now landlords, which is something that after renting for so many years, I had kind of dreamed about as kind of a measurement, a threshold of success. It was actually my oldest child that made us consider Puerto Rico again. He asked us, he said, when are we gonna go back to learning Spanish? I haven't practiced Spanish in a really long time. And we're just me and my husband were just kind of looking at each other like, oh, and then my husband's like, we can move to Puerto Rico. And so it just so happened that while we were kind of toying with this idea and doing more research about Puerto Rico and the neighborhoods and schools, my dad was living in Puerto Rico. He was living here before Maria, and then he evacuated right before Maria and didn't come back until 3 months later. I timed my trip to visit him for the weekend that he was returning to the island. At first I wasn't that impressed with Puerto Rico when it came to the beaches and the real estate. But then I went ahead and I scheduled some school tours, and I just fell in love with the schools. I was looking at private schools that cost somewhere between $500 to $10,000 a year and went all the way from 2 years old to 12th grade. But in general, I just discovered that the schools had a different attitude about kids than I had observed in any of our previous schools. The kids were just way more active, way happier. There was more play spaces. There was transitions between classes where they would encourage small kids to jump or climb or skip. There was a lot of focus on music, collaboration, presentations. These are really small communities too. You know, a graduating class of between 40 to 80 kids. My high school graduating class was about 800. And so everyone just really knows each other. You see the high schoolers hanging out, and it's just like a family. So even though I liked the schools, I still wasn't 100% convinced, mostly because I thought that it would be a little too expensive for us. I thought that with my husband owning his own business, he wasn't earning nearly as much as he could be if he was working remote for a California company. And so paying for a private school, and then the area that I really liked the most was Condado, and Condado is very expensive. I thought it would be very uncomfortable. I thought that we wouldn't be able to buy a place, and so our rent would be really expensive. So then my flight home was canceled because Atlanta had snow. So I ended up spending an extra weekend in 85-degree weather, chilling on the beach, hanging out with my dad. He was moving from one furnished condo to another beach furnished condo, just like a block away from each other. So it was really easy to just helped him carry his suitcases over. The super, or like, I don't know, somebody who worked at that new condo said, oh, you should go to this really fun tree lighting ceremony at these apartments where my wife is a realtor, and oh, if you want to consider buying a place, she can show you some of the units. They're really nice. We're thinking, oh wow, like they're gonna roast a pig, they're gonna have music, let's do it. And so if you've seen some of my other videos, you may know this already. The condos, the community where we went for the tree lighting festival is now where I'm living. I originally thought that I wouldn't be able to buy, but then about a month after my trip, while we were applying to the private schools that I liked, the company that I worked for was acquired, and I owned a very small percentage of the company. It was like 0.3%, but I ended up getting a 5-figure buyout that was enough for a down payment on a condo. I mean, my husband and myself are kind of corny in that we really feel like sometimes the universe tries to tell us something or tries to give us something. And so for us, like, just how weird it was that the reason I found the condo was that we could actually afford and enjoy the community and walk to the kids' schools. The reason I found it was because my flight was canceled because of snow in Atlanta in November. If you've been to Atlanta, you know that that's crazy. That like hardly ever happens. And then also just the fact that the timing was so good. I had worked for that company for over 3 years, and I had thought an acquisition was never going to happen. And then they're just like, oh yeah, we're getting acquired. You're getting a check, just at the time when we needed money. It still ended up being a crazy amount of work, crazy expensive, but we just felt like the universe was telling us that we needed to move to Puerto Rico. We lived here about 3 months and we are pretty happy with our decision so far. We don't have everything figured out. Even after 3 months, there's still so much to do. Of all the places that we've lived, and we've lived and visited a lot of places, so far Puerto Rico is our favorite, and we just can't imagine a place that has a better, that checks more boxes on the things that we want. To have the urban city life, walkable to a beautiful beach where our kids can have great education and where we can learn Spanish, and where we can afford to live. You know, Puerto Rico isn't without its problems. There's definitely things that are frustrating, like the Jones Act, and anytime we go out to eat at a restaurant, it being so expensive because of sales tax. But in general, we really like Puerto Rico for us and for our goals for our family. If you want to consider moving to Puerto Rico, please subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos. See ya!